England's Prime Minister has an election victory under his belt and appears to be flexing his conservative muscles. David Cameron announced this week he's targeting extremism in the UK. Cameron's crackdown proposals include giving police new powers to disrupt radical activities. Now, that would include the closing of buildings, including mosques with radical preachers. And he would increase the government's retention of phone and email records to search for jihadist activity and connections. With more on this story, Orig News correspondent Sara Firth has details from London.
And forming part of a counter-extremism bill that will be introduced to Parliament in David Cameron's speech that will be delivered by the Queen. That's going to take place on the 27th of May. But let's talk you through some of these powers that will form that bill. There are going to be new immigration rules. There are also going to be powers to close down areas that are used by so-called extremist groups. And there would also be an extremism disruption order, a kind of banning order, if you like. Now, under those proposals, ministers will be able to silence any group or individual that they feel is undermining democracy, or as David Cameron keeps talking about, British values of tolerance and mutual respect. But look, this is where things get problematic, because there are already big concerns that this could move into the territory of stamping over people's rights to free speech, one of the fundamental rights that is fiercely defended here in Britain as one of those traditional British values. Why is this so important? Why is the Prime Minister focusing in on this? Britain, in comparison to many of the European countries, and we know Europe's had a big problem with foreign fighters, Britain in particular has really struggled with this issue. Hundreds of fighters over the years have left Britain, gone over to fight in Syria and Iraq, and in many cases come back, returned to Britain. And it's really proven a very difficult challenge for the British authorities. Now, I've actually reported extensively over the last couple of years with the loss of those groups. A lot of the people actually who a couple of years ago were very easily able to leave the countries, and we joined some of the convoys reporting with them at the time, but then weren't coming back. They were staying in those areas that they entered in Syria, getting involved with some of these groups, and in some cases becoming radicalized. And the problem for the authorities is it's very difficult to pinpoint which people in particular that have traveled, that are coming back, have actually become radicalised. So it's really something that over the last year or so the British government has been struggling with, and struggling to find ways to deal with this new developing problem. We know that the Islamic State fighters and the threat that that's posing in the Middle East is absolutely centred priority for the international community to deal with right now. But as we said, domestically, Britain now really looking for ways to bring in rules that are going to clamp down on what's seen as a very real problem here in Britain. As we said, though, that is not going to be introduced, that counter-extremism bill, to Parliament until the 27th of May. And Julian, expect it to have some pretty fierce opposition in Parliament, because, as we said, some very big concerns that the idea of these banning orders, being able to silence people with a very loose definition at the moment of who counts as an extremist, what would count as extremism, without those details solved and laid out clearly, you are going to have, it's thought, when these powers are introduced, when this counter-extremism bill is introduced, some pretty fierce opposition from many in the country here.